Session. Thank you so much for turning up for this presentation, which I'm going to take around Microsoft Azure. Before I start with the presentation, let me introduce myself. My name is Vaibhav Gujral, and I'm from India, and I've been in Omaha since last 1 year. I've been working for Hitachi Consulting as a lead software engineer, and we are working for a client over here. And I've been working from day one on Microsoft technologies, and I've been working on and around Azure since 2010. So when I started working on Azure, it was not generally available, and there were only 3 services available. Now there are so many services, even I don't know the names of all those. So that's pretty much about it. And the session, I don't expect you to be having any knowledge on Azure. That is all okay, because this session is going to cover basics. So even if you don't know anything of Azure before, and this is the first time, if you have worked on Azure before, at least it will help you in brushing up your concepts, and you will take away something out of it. And this is my first session in my whole career, which I am presenting in front of a technical community. So I want to thank Matt and Brian for taking that risk and trusting me that I can present the session. So I hope I will be able to present it well. And lastly, the sponsor sponsoring the session, thank you. And I have divided this session among various sections, and I will target each section to close within 10-15 minutes. But in case it takes more time and we have to close the presentation, then all the sections are independent, so we can actually skip the pending sections and we can conclude it. So we will not lose on any part then. Okay, it's not moving. Okay, so before we jump into anything into Azure services specifically, I would like to cover what is Azure, what are the different services which are offered by Azure, and what is an Azure subscription, how does Microsoft bills if we are using any Azure resources, and finally how Azure portal works, which is an online portal through which we can connect to Azure and use Azure resources. Basics first. What is cloud computing? It's nothing new. It's a new term, I understand, which has been a hype since last 5 to 7 years. But as far as I have read about it, I understand it's been, the underlying principles have started taking shape since the day internet has come into the picture. We used to have Gmails, which is also a form of software as a service, which is nothing but a form of cloud, or a service which cloud offers, which we are going to see in further slides. It provides a modern day alternative to the traditional on-premises data centers. We all mostly, I understand, belongs to software organizations, or at least we are aware of IT, how it works. So in most of the organizations, we have data centers where we have servers, racks, and everything set up, where we host our applications and give access to our users. So it's nothing but an extension to that, where it is taken care of by the vendor and we consume the services from them. Mostly it works as a pay-as-you-go model. When I say mostly, because we avail services from a vendor and we consume the services provided by cloud provider, and we pay for the amount of time or the we basically pay based on the consumption. It works the same way as the utility works. Like we have gas connections at home, we have water connections at home. So the amount of gas and water we use, we pay for them. The same applies here also. Whatever we are using, we pay for them. Overall benefits includes when cloud grows as the number of people. It's a shared environment where it supports multi-tenancy. So as the workloads which are hosted in cloud grows, it results into economies of cloud, which results in bringing the cost down, not only for the cloud provider, but it actually starts costing less for consumers too. Speed, global scale. It's a cloud provider. If you have to choose a cloud provider, I would recommend you to go with a provider who has global scale. So I will come into that aspect of the cloud provider in the next slide. Apart from these basic benefits, there has been a security concern about cloud providers with customers, but just to cover that aspect, Azure has been one of the most complied cloud provider. They have most number of security compliances and certifications when it comes to the security perspective, and those can be checked it out at Azure Compliance Center, which is a portal which lists down all those details. When we say about cloud, there are basically three different models where we can deploy or set up our clouds: private, public, and hybrid. Public is where everything is hosted and managed on a environment provided by the cloud provider. Private, as the name suggests, it is on our own data center. Hybrid is the mix of both. For example, we have a highly scalable website which we want to host it in public cloud, and we have a highly secure database which we want to keep it in our own private cloud, and we can join them together into a single solution. Service models, if we will go through left to right, so if you will see the initially how it used to be traditionally, how IT used to work, we used to have data centers in our offices, and everything used to be managed by a specific or designated IT team. They used to manage the hardware, OS upgrades, licensing, and hosting our applications and everything. Then it moved into a service model called as infrastructure as a service, where everything related to hardware, network, storage is taken care by the cloud provider, but over and above that, operating system patches, the middleware, the runtimes required by our applications to run, and so on, and our own applications that we are going to host, they all come into our area of concern. We have to manage those under IaaS. Perfect example of IaaS is virtual machines. When we host virtual machines in VMware or Azure or AWS, cloud providers provide us the hardware, but the OS that runs into those, it's all onto us. The runtimes that are running in that, the applications that we are hosting on it. Next evolution came with platform as a service, where even the OS and the runtimes, middleware is also managed by the cloud provider, and we just as a cloud consumer or a developer, we only focus on the application and the data that we are going to host it on the cloud. Finally, software as a service, as I said, I see it as the first innings of the cloud when it started with internet, where we had different websites, web applications hosted in cloud. And for example, now recently, if you would have heard of Office 365 and Dynamics Online, they all are examples of SaaS, software as a service, where companies actually handle everything and they provide software as a service. We just need to connect to these services over browser, over internet, and we can use. We don't need to bother about how they are hosted, how they are managed, what is the underlying hardware, what is the underlying infrastructure, and so on. Coming to Azure, it's the Microsoft Azure is Microsoft's leading cloud computing platform. It's been in existence since last 8 years or so. It was launched, I guess, in 2008, and then it was generally available from 2010. It has global presence with over 38 data centers. It provides online portal experience. When I say seamless online experience, we can do anything in Azure. We can create resources, manage them, manage any Azure resource on an online web-based portal which we can access it through any device which is connected to internet. It supports public, private, and hybrid cloud models, which we just discussed, and it supports IaaS and PaaS models, which includes the services like virtual machines, web applications, SQL databases, and so on. The SaaS offering is, like as I said, Office 365 is an example, and Dynamics, they all are SaaS examples which Microsoft offers. When I say private cloud, when I'm going to speak about Azure now, I will be referring it to the public cloud, but the private cloud offering is known as Azure Stack, which is an add-on on Windows Server 2016, which can be installed on on-premise data centers and can be consumed. Global presence, as I said, Microsoft Azure has 38 data centers. Why I wanted to cover this in this session was because in today's globalized world, it is very critical that we understand how we store our data, because most of the countries around the world have their data protected laws, and they don't allow data to go and they don't allow developers to save data anywhere outside their country or at least region. So when we see Microsoft Azure's presence across the continents, it becomes much easier for developers to actually go and target specific regions. Coming to Azure services, as I said, when I started, there were only 3 services. It used to be compute, where we used to have virtual machines. We used to have cloud services, where we have web roles and worker roles, and it was storage and SQL database. But now there is a lots of services, and overall we can divide all the services into 4 main categories: compute, network, data, and application. When I say compute services, these are the services which majorly consume the computational resources from Azure data centers. These include but are not limited to cloud services, app services, databases, and so on. Data services include all the data related, storage related services. For example, Microsoft Azure Storage. Application services are used to build and operate and support basically the middleware services which are used for our applications. For example, Azure Active Directory, which is used for identity, and we have service bus for messaging and so on. Network services, Microsoft provides a set of network services so that it becomes much easier to have distributed architecture set up in Azure, where we have hybrid architectures and so on. For example, virtual networks, ExpressRoute, and so on. I think this will be pretty small. You might not be able to read all the services, but what I wanted to highlight here was the different stack of services that currently Azure hosts. So on the bottom one, you see the infrastructure services, which includes virtual machines, containers, blob storage, virtual networks, load balancer, traffic managers, and so on. And on the top of them sits the platform services, including cloud services, app services, mobile apps, web apps, and initially there was a set of IoT services which Microsoft has launched. Then it has been continuously adding to it. So there is a separate set of services they provide, which includes stream analytics and mobile engagement, machine learning, and so on. Then there are few security related and hybrid services too, which includes Active Directory. Active Directory supports multi-factor authentication and so on. So this might not be the latest updated chart, but there is an infographic which is shared by Microsoft, which is always updated. So you can go to Microsoft website and download it, which lists the complete latest picture of what all services Azure is offering as of today. To anyone who is looking forward to starting with Azure, good news is there is a free trial which Microsoft provides. If you will sign up for that, you get $200 to be as credit to use for first 1 month. And if you have a MSDN subscription, you can avail Azure benefits which come as part of Azure of MSDN subscription, and it ranges somewhere between $50 to $150 depending upon the subscription you have. If you belong to a Microsoft partner or Microsoft member, there are different set of offers which Microsoft gives, so you can go ahead and avail that. And I didn't find anywhere listed about the last point, but I have personally used that when I started last year on this program. There is a program called Visual Studio Dev Essentials, which you can register. If you will Google it out, you will get the registration link and you can go and register. So one of the benefits under that program is Azure subscription, which gives $300 for a year, which roughly translates into $25 per month, which is a good amount for you to test different services around Azure. Billing and pricing, I wanted this slide to be explicitly here because when Azure developer, we should know the Azure resources we are going to use and how it is going to impact the bill that Microsoft is going to send us. So there is a pricing calculator available on Microsoft's website. So before you decide the Azure resources that you are going to use as part of your solution, or the different size of the resources that you are going to use, you should go and check it out in the pricing calculator. It will give you a rough estimate how much it is going to charge on a monthly basis. Most of the Azure services that are offered actually have 3 different tiers how they are charged: basic, standard, and premium. So basic being the most basic one and premium being the highest one, and it differs. All these tiers differ on the pricing as well as the performance levels. We'll come to subscriptions in later slide, but it's very critical that we know how we can go and check it out, the current usage of the resources that we are using, which we can check it out in Azure portal, which I'm going to show it in a moment. And resource cost is actually different for each Azure resource. So you should understand that when we are deploying a single database, it will be charged differently. When we are deploying a virtual machine, it will be charged differently, and we should know how much it is going to charge. And Microsoft, when they send bills, they do send itemized bills, so we can find it out, but it should not be a surprise for us, so it's better to check it out in advance. And if you are a manager, or if you are a account owner in Azure, or you are product owner where you want to manage your Azure cost, it's worth checking out the billing and the pricing. Azure portal, it's a web-based portal which, as I said, it's a one-stop portal where you can go and manage all your Azure resources. There are, as of now, 2 versions of Azure portals which are live. The current main is Azure portal, which supports most of the services, and the previous one was classic portal, which is still into existence because there are few of the services which are not supported on the new portal, or either they are into migration. So what Microsoft says is, once all the services are ported into the new portal, the old classic one will be decommissioned. I will quickly show how Azure portal works. Are you able to see? So once you log into a Azure portal after taking an Azure subscription, once you log into the portal, you will end up into a dashboard which actually gives you a snapshot of what resources and what's happening under your subscription. For example, it's a completely customized dashboard. You can go ahead and customize whatever you want to see into the dashboard. But for example, in my case, I have set it up like the all resources widget is which shows what resources are currently running in my subscription. The service health widget shows all green tick marks across the globe. It shows how the health of the data centers is across the globe. If there is any outage happening in any of the data centers, it will show a red logo over there, and so on. You see here a help plus support logo here. If you want to take help from Microsoft support, you can go and into the help plus support, and you can raise a Microsoft support ticket and they can revert back to you. On the left side is the menu where you can actually go and explore the different services, or you can create a new service directly from here. It works on a blade structure where every time I click on something, it opens up a new blade, and the navigation works from one blade to the next, and I can come out of the blades by closing all those blades. And if I want, I can close the first blade directly, so that it will close the rest of the blades. I can select the services that I want to use based on the classification as listed here, or I can directly search from the search box if I want to use. Let's say if I want to create a virtual machine, I can search over here and let's say virtual network. It will give me the complete list of services that I can avail. And as I said, it will keep on. If I click here, it will open the next blade, and I can go ahead and create a virtual network gateway, and it will keep on creating new blades, and once I am done, I can keep on closing it. And I can directly come here if I want to come to a blade. Once all the open blades are closed, it lands up back into the dashboard. The bell type icon that you are seeing here, it gives you the notifications. If you are deploying any resource, or if you are how much is your remaining balance in your subscription and so on, whatever notifications are, you can see over there. If you want to customize your portal like theme and all, you can go ahead and change it under the settings. This is the same help plus support, where you can directly create a support ticket for Microsoft from here, or you can go and again click here and raise a support ticket. You can go ahead and view your bill, which opens up your account center. So if you will go to account center from here, it will list the different subscriptions that you have and the different settings. You can go ahead and change the different billing related settings over there. In the meantime, okay, it came up. So I have couple of subscriptions, so I can, whichever I want to explore, I can go ahead and click on that, and it will open up the different options available for that. The message that you are seeing, this subscription has a spending limit on it. Click here to change this setting. It basically indicates I am using MSDN subscription, so I get $150 per month for their credit. So by default, what Microsoft does is, as soon as my $150 are spent, they actually suspend my subscription. So if I want it to use my resource, keep continuing using my resources, I need to remove that spending limit on top of it. So what happens is, once my $150 are spent, they will start charging my credit card. So, and in any case, any one of you is going to register for a free trial or a subscription, they will ask for a credit card. So you can feel free and go and provide it, because they won't charge you over free benefits, because they generally suspend your subscription. If you really want to use your credit card, you can contact Microsoft support and you can re-enable your subscription. But there is another model, pay-as-you-go model. If you are taking pay-as-you-go model, then they directly start charging your credit card from day one based on your usage. So as I said, it gives you the different aspects of your subscription. Like it charges me on monthly basis, so it says how many credits are left for me and how many number of days, and what are the different quotas that I have left with. So each subscription comes with a set of quota. For example, Azure Storage needs to have a storage account, which is a container for all storage resources. Within each subscription, we can by default have 100 storage accounts. So that is a quota that is assigned by Microsoft. In case we need to increase that, we need to again reach out to Microsoft. So it shows those quotas over here, and it is showing the billing also, like how much billing I have not been using this subscription a lot, and I can go ahead and modify the payment methods, address, and so on. Lastly, this is the Azure Classic portal. So if you want to really use the Classic portal, which is not recommended by Microsoft though, but you can go and create your new resources from this menu over here. One thing that you should be aware of, I won't suggest you to go and create any resources here, but you should be aware of the settings here. It lists the subscriptions here. Let me zoom out. So it lists the subscriptions, the management certificates. I will come in coming slides how these things work, the administrators on your subscription, the affinity groups, and the usage. So at least if you have to use Classic Portal for the resources which were created using Classic Portal, this thing should be your place to go. At least you should be aware of this section. Okay. Moving ahead, management tools. We should be aware of the tools that we can use when we are working with Azure. The first thing, as I have shown you, is the Azure portal, where we can, which is a web-based portal where we can manage all our Azure resources. But outside that, since we are developers, we are programmers, here is a small list of tools that we can use. To start with, I assume most of us are .NET developers, so Microsoft Visual Studio is a tool which we can use. Along with Azure SDK, which is listed here. Azure SDK for .NET, if you can install it with Visual Studio, you get all the client libraries and tools that are required for Azure development. Azure PowerShell, which is a scripting tool in Windows. It is a set of modules and commandlets which we can download and install with PowerShell, and we can manage all our Azure resources through PowerShell. And it is a very good tool for IT team who needs to manage Azure resources like virtual machines and so on. But that is all about Windows. But if there are users who want similar feature in let's say Mac OS or Linux and so on outside Windows, so Microsoft also provides a cross-platform command line utility which is known as Azure CLI, which can be installed on Mac OS and Linux, and we can do literally the same operations that we can perform on PowerShell. Azure Management REST APIs, if you want to consume the same functionalities that are offered by Portal through REST APIs, Microsoft provides a set of Azure Management REST APIs which can be consumed over REST, and you can manage your resources over REST. These all are the tools which can be used across Azure resources, but there are few tools which you can use for specific Azure services. For example, SQL Server Management Studio. It can be used to connect to the SQL database that is hosted on Azure, because that is based on the SQL engine. Virtual machines, if anyone is here from IT background, they will be aware of Chef, Puppet, System Center. These all are used for managing virtual machines in on-premise data center. The same can be extended to manage the resources, virtual machines in Azure. Storage, Cloud Explorer, Azure Storage Explorer. I am going to demo you today how these work. There is another tool called AsCopy, which is used for copying data from outside external sources to Azure Storage. And if anyone of you is aware of, there is a Azure service called Azure Service Bus. We can use Azure Service Bus Explorer for connecting to Azure Service Bus. I would be skipping this because I can show you how PowerShell and CLI work. I can connect to it, but I was also planning to show you Visual Studio tools, but I am thinking to cover Visual Studio as part of Azure Storage, which I am going to cover in further slides. Before we jump into Azure core services, the last thing that you should be aware as a .NET developer is how Azure deployment works. Way back in 2008, when Azure was announced, it came with a service model known as Azure Service Management, or which we now call it as Classic model. What happened under that was all resources were independent. We can go ahead and create any resource independently. We cannot group them, we cannot tag them. For example, if I have a solution which needs 2 websites, 2 SQL databases, 2 virtual machines, and a storage account, I have to install them manually, deploy them manually, I have to manage them manually, and I have to maintain a sequence of upgrading them, deploying them, deleting them at my end. It was a more of coordinated approach. I have to keep it at my end. If I somehow mess up with that sequence, it used to mess up my whole solution which is running in Azure. As I said, tags were not supported. We cannot tag the resources under that model. And another problem in that approach was it used to allow co-administrators in the subscription. When I was showing you the classic portal, I have shown you the settings tab under which there was a tab for administrators. So let's say if I have a Azure subscription and I want to add another person from my team to manage some resources in my Azure subscription. So what used to happen under classic model was I had the privilege to go ahead and add another user as an administrator in my subscription. As an administrator, the other person used to get access to the complete subscription resources, irrespective of if I only wanted the particular person to access only SQL database. But there was no privilege given to me so that I can restrict the user to actually access only SQL database in my Azure subscription. Either I can give access to everything or nothing. That was what co-administrators were. And under that model also, Microsoft used to provide REST-based APIs to manage resources, but at that time it used to be all different APIs for different services. If I have to manage SQL database, I have to call a different set of APIs. If I have to call storage, if I have to manage storage, I have to call different APIs. So it was all different APIs for different services. So as and when Azure evolved, Microsoft realized that they need to do something with the deployment models that they have been following. And in 2014, Microsoft came up with a model known as Resource Manager model. It provides a template-based repeatable solution to the deployment where when I say template, it's a JSON-based template which we can create at our end, or we can generate it from Azure portal. We can add different resources to it and we can deploy and manage. When I say deploy, deployment template, it's not only meant for deployment, but actually we can control the complete life cycle of our resources. With Resource Manager, Microsoft introduced grouping, tagging of the resources. We can group them into a single resource group. For example, the other example which I have taken for the classic model, where I have a solution having 2 web apps, 2 databases, and 1 storage account and so on. I can club all those resources into a single resource group and I can manage them together rather than maintaining them as a different resource altogether. Moreover, on top of it, within the resource groups, I can actually maintain the dependency. For example, my application web apps, I want my web apps to be deployed after my SQL database has been set up. So I can maintain and create those dependencies in my template. It was faster than the classic model. I don't have any stats with me, but this is what is mentioned in Microsoft, so I will go with that. And as I said, by template, it's a JSON-based template, so it's well accepted everywhere. And it's very simple to understand and use. Microsoft recommends all the new Azure resources to be created using this new model. And even on Microsoft website, they say if you have any resource created in classic portal or the classic model, and you should try to move into ARM. If not, you can reach out to Microsoft support to take their guidance. Resource groups. Before we jump into resource group, I will just like to reiterate that any service that you are consuming in Azure, you create nothing but resources. For example, if I'm creating a SQL database or a web app or a cloud service, these all are resources in Azure world. So under ARM, all the resources are grouped into resource groups. You cannot create a resource without a resource group attached to it. And at max, a resource can be attached to a single resource group. You cannot have a resource attached to multiple resource groups. When we attach or when we create a resource within a resource group, it doesn't bind us that we should only retain our resource in that particular resource group. We have freedom to actually move that resource out of that resource group into another resource group based on our requirement. The resources in a resource groups can be in different regions. As I said, Microsoft has 38 different data centers or regions spread across globe. So it's not necessary that when I'm creating my resource group, it might be in US. I can very well actually go and create resources in Europe data centers also and put them into resource group which is hosted in Azure, because resource group is nothing physical, which is, or it's just a logical grouping of the resources, and it's just binded to a single location just to track of it, nothing else. When I say everything in Azure is a resource, Microsoft has under the hood, Microsoft has introduced some resource providers which actually provide a set of APIs for working on with those resources. When I was talking about classic portal or classic model, I was saying that we used to have different set of APIs for different set of resources, but now those days are gone. Under this resource manager model, we have resource providers who we can use these resource providers under a single resource manager API. We just have to specify the resource we want to create. It automatically identifies which resource provider has to be used, and it's a single set of API that can be used for managing any type of resource under resource manager. For example, if we are working on Active Directory, we have a resource provider called Microsoft.Azure Active Directory resource provider, and so on. One important thing to know here is when you are registering for a subscription, you might not be registered with all these resource providers when you are registering for your subscription. You have to go manually and register for your resource providers. I will show you when I will go next on the Azure portal how you can register. It's a straightforward process, but initially by default there is only a limited set of providers with which you will be registered for, but you can keep on registering based on whatever you need. So here is how it looks like now. As I was saying, there is a single set of REST API endpoints which exists now, which is based on ARM, which sits over on top of resource providers. There you can see I have taken an example where we have a LOB app and we have an IaaS workload. So all my resources, I have placed it into a single resource group for my LOB app, and all the resources belonging to IaaS workload, I have placed it into a single resource group so that I can manage them as a single unit rather than individual resources. Role-based access control, another thing that I have covered in classic model was the only way I can give an access to a resource in my subscription was to make him an administrator. But now Microsoft has come up with role-based access control within ARM, where we can actually give fine-grained control up to a resource level to a particular user. And we can specify the role also, that what role should be there for that particular user on that resource. It might start with an owner, which is similar to a co-administrator in the classic model, who will have access to the everything. Then it further drills down into specific resource level roles like SQL DB contributor, who can manage the SQL database, and we have SQL security manager who can manage the security policies of the database. We can have a storage account contributor who can manage a storage account. So like this, we can also have our custom roles also, where we can give read access and read write access to different resources. It also supports service principles, which gives us a good way to extend our role-based access to our Azure resources, which should be worth looking into. This is how a resource manager template look like. Pretty simple. The schema says the schema of the JSON schema reference that we are going to use. Content version is the version. We can give any number to it. We can give 1.0.0 or we can give 1.5.0. It's all for our reference how we want to manage the versioning of our templates. Parameters, variables, resources and outputs, these all tags refer to similar to what we have in a method that we write in our C# code. Parameters are what we want to pass to our template, the customizable values. Variables are to make our expressions more simple into JSON, so that we don't have to club everything into a single expression. We can create variables and use them into different expressions. Resources are where we define what type of resources we want to create, and if there is any dependency on any other resource, and if we can likewise specify rest of the other properties of that resource. And output is finally, once everything is deployed and managed, what we want as the output. It might be as simple return from the deployment or whatever it is. So this is how the resource tag looks like, where we can specify the name of the resource, the location. The location refers to the region where we want to host it. Depends on, if you will see the depends on tag, it says we can mention the resources on which this particular resource depends upon. So once we define this, ARM model will automatically take care of the dependencies. We can define the different properties of these whichever resource we are creating. For example, if it's a virtual machine, if we want to specify any specific property, we can mention here, and so on. And these differ based on the different resources. I will show you a quick demo. We can create resource groups using Visual Studio 2 and through Portal. I will show you both. So I am into Visual Studio 2017 now. Before I jump into resource groups, I will show you Cloud Explorer that I was talking about. This is the Cloud Explorer that I was talking about in the tools section. So I have connected it to my subscription, and it lists down all the app service, SQL databases and servers that I have. I can manage it from here. Coming to resource manager, resource group, let me go ahead and create a resource group. Once you have installed Azure SDK, as I said, it comes with all the client libraries and tools. It also comes with all the templates that you need for creating your Azure solutions. So once you have that, then Visual Studio 2017 actually comes with SDK, but if you are on 2015 or below, you have to install it separately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a resource group here using the template that is available here. Once I click OK, it asks me which type of template I want to create. I can go ahead with a blank template and customize it on my own. But it also gives me a few templates which are pre-generated, and I can use them. For example, virtual machine scale set, web app, a plain web app, a web app plus SQL, a logic app, and so on. What I am going to do is I am going to create a web app plus SQL resource group. So what it does is it creates a PowerShell script for me to deploy the resources, which is part of my template. So it details the complete deployment steps which are there as part of this. But the interesting thing to see here is the JSON template that is generated as part of this resource group template. So here you can see we have a schema, content version, parameters section, variables, resources. We can define each resource with their different properties. For example, since this is a SQL database that we are going to create, it asks for administrator login and the administrator password, and so on. We can assign a tag to the resource that we are trying to create here. We can specify, as I said, properties will differ based on the resources. For example, here we are creating a database, so properties differ. For example, we have to specify the collision that we are going to use for the database, the maximum size of the database, and so on. Likewise, if we'll go to the web app, it will differ for the web application. Let me quickly. So here is the website resource that
it has listed down in the template. It has added a tag here called website, whereas in database it was database, so that we can actually reach out to these resources independently using the tags. And its properties also will differ. For example, for our web application, we can specify all our app config settings that we use in web.config. We can provide here, it will create all those settings there. Coming to portal, we can do the same thing from Azure portal too. And again, this is just a demo, but these resource group templates are completely customizable, and you can have it, you can add a number of resources whatever are part of your solution. Let me go to the portal. I will create a new resource group here. So I have already created a resource group before coming here. I will go ahead and create a new for say, yeah. So as I said, it's just a logical container for all the resources, so it doesn't matter whichever location you specify here. You can add resources belonging to any region in this resource group. So once it's created, you can go and refresh it. It comes over here. If you will scroll down, you can see the resource costs here. Let me go to the one which I have created before coming. Under that, I have already added couple of resources. For example, I had an app service, a SQL server, and a storage account, so it gives me the cost based on the resource level, how much it's costing me in part of that resource group. I can actually monitor and see all the metrics for all my resources over here. And I can go ahead and select any resource. I'm not sure why to view metrics. Okay, so this is about resource groups. And once you create a resource group, actually if you will create any of the resources later, you have to actually specify a resource group. And when you are creating any resource which was also available in the classic model, it gives you an option to actually choose the classic model also. But as I said, Microsoft recommends that we should use resource manager model, but it does gives option for you to select classic also. If I click on create, in every resource which is supported by resource manager, there is a setting for resource group which we have to specify in everywhere. For example, here you can see the resource group. We have an option to create a new resource group, or if we want, we can actually add it to an existing resource group. And location is by default selected in central, but there are few services which are not offered. Like each region doesn't support every Azure service, so it might be the case that we have a service which is not supported in the region where the resource group was created at. So we can go ahead and we are free to create it at a different location. So I can go and select, let's say, East US 2, and it's a virtual machine which will take a lot of time, but I will show you another thing, how we can generate the existing templates from our solutions. For example, this was the resource group which I have created before. It has 3 resources. It has these 4 resources as of now. I can go ahead and view template. I'm not sure why it is coming as disabled now, but if you will click on this, it will actually open up the template and you can download it, export it, and you can use it for your reference. Okay, moving ahead, starting with Azure services now, the very first core service that as an Azure developer you should be aware of is an Azure App Service, which is nothing but a combination of 4 different set of services. If you have been working on Azure since last few years, you would have heard of 2 different services called as websites and mobile services. Now those have been merged into a single offering known as Azure App Service. So as the slide depicts, it's a combination of 4 different services: web apps, mobile apps, logic apps, and API apps. Web apps is nothing but the web applications which can be developed using Node.js, Java, Python, or PHP, any language of your choice. Mobile apps behave as a backend as a service for your mobile services. You can support push notification based on that. You can also provide identity services like using third-party federated services like Facebook, Google, and Azure Active Directory for them per se. Logic apps are the workflow apps which you can create under the umbrella app service. API apps are the more secure APIs based on Swagger metadata which you can consume in your applications pretty easily. The good part about this is whenever you create any of these apps, they are created under a single app service, and the underlying basic services which are part of app service offering are offered by all those 4 services now. When app services was designed, initially it was designed for continuous integration and delivery. That's why it works well with all major source control providers like TFS, GitHub, and so on. We have an option to choose few of the existing templates from the gallery. Like if we want to create a web app, we can go for WordPress or Joomla or Drupal. If we want to go for existing templates, we can go ahead and create them using the templates. And as I said, we can use any language of our choice. It might be ASP.NET or Java, Python, whatever it is. Before you create an app service, it's important to understand what are app service plans. Whenever we create an app service, before that we have to create an app service plan which actually details or specifies the resources that our app service is going to consume. For example, the settings might include the location where should the app service should go and reside, or the number of cores it should be running on, or the amount of memory or RAM it should be using, and so on, and how many number of instances should be hosted for that particular app. So all these specific things settings are specified in a plan called Azure App Service Plan. So whenever we are creating any app service, it might be logic app or web app or mobile app, it asks for us for a app service plan which should be predefined, or we can create a new one when we are creating it by default for the first time. Azure Web App, I'm going to cover a demo on Web App here, because it's the most simple case for demo here, but we can do the similar things for all the different 3 types of other apps. So Azure Web Apps, it's hosted, as I said, it's hosted within an Azure App Service. It enables deployments of web application quickly. When I say web applications, deployment of web applications quickly, it is integrated with Visual Studio, so we can right click and publish our web applications directly from Visual Studio into Azure Web App Service. It supports different languages. Basically, it inherits all the different features of app service overall. For the logging diagnostics purpose, it does provide IIS logs, web server logs, and application logs, performance stats from the VM from where it is hosted on, which can be downloaded. And the good part is when we are developing with .NET and we are using Visual Studio, it also enables remote debugging of those websites when they are hosted on web apps or Azure App Service. We can remotely debug them on using Visual Studio, which gives us a good option to actually see if there is something going wrong in the application. let me create a new or open a web application and show how it works. I have already created a demo web application which was a plain web application, but I will go ahead and create a new so that you can see what all it goes. I will go ahead and create a ASP.NET web application. So here it gives me option to create an Azure API app or Azure mobile app here. Otherwise, if I choose the other existing templates, it will automatically assume it to be a Azure web app. So I'm going to choose Azure MVC here, and I will go and click on OK. Once it creates a project, it's not specific to any demo purpose, but you can actually deploy any of your websites that you are running under Visual Studio. You can host it in Azure the same way. Let me show how it looks like when I'm running it locally. So it's a plain website which I have created here. Let me go and show how we can publish it on Azure and do remote debugging. We can go ahead and select publish. So one of the options that we see there is about Microsoft Azure App Service. We can go ahead and create a new one, or we can select existing. If we will select existing, when we are going to publish it, it will give the list of the app services which we have already created before. So we can choose one of them and it will override the bits which are deployed there. For now, I will go ahead and create a new one. I can give any name of my choice, and I think I need to enter my credentials here. Oops. Anyways, it's able to pick up my subscription details, so I can choose whichever subscription I'm planning to host it. It gives the resource groups because App Services also supports resource manager model. So I will choose the resource group I want to host it. And as I said, it also asks for an app service plan. So I have already created a resource service plan for my app service before, where if you will see, B1 is nothing but the size of the app which should be created. B1 stands for basic one, whereas the other one is standard one. These all are different sizes of the app service that we can create. So I'm going to create a basic website which will be hosted in central US data center. So I click on create. It says it's deploying step 0 of 1. I'm not sure if it will go through. All right. So it has started publishing it. in the meantime, I will show you the other website which I have created. So I'm connecting to my subscription under Cloud Explorer. I have already connected to my subscription, and I can see the different app services which are already there. So the site is published. So it's coming up now. So it's running on Azure now, the same website which I have just now created. So it's pretty easy to publish our web apps on Azure now. And let me go ahead and refresh here and see how it works, if it is listed over here or not. I'm not sure what's up, but I'm not able to connect, probably some network issue. But I can actually, once I select that, then I can go ahead, and it gives an option whether we want to go ahead and debug it remotely. Once we do it, it says like we do it for applications running on web servers, we can do remote debugging the same way we can do here. It gives a menu option for attaching debugger. Once we attach that, then we can debug it locally. The other thing that I can show you here is, since this is not working, there is a concept called site extensions. I don't know how many of you might have heard of. But it is also known as Kudu, which gives us certain areas where we can go and monitor what's happening in our website. Bad luck. That's it. I think from web apps I cannot show it. It's not connecting anywhere, anything. I think something gone wrong with the network, but that's okay. You can try when you are back home, and if you are trying to publish a website and your application is live, try connecting to typing .scm in between the URL and see what it lands up there. It will give you certain extensions using which you can even see your console command line or from the VM. And because the only challenge we have in app services, it doesn't gives us remote desktop access to the virtual machine on which it is running on. Moving ahead, the next thing that I'm going to cover is about Azure Storage, which is one of the core services which has been existing since day one in Azure. When I say Azure Storage, the first basic step for using Azure Storage is to create an Azure Storage account. Before we move into it, just to give a brief idea on what does Azure Storage Service is. It's a durable and scalable redundant storage, and it has certain types of storage options that it provides us as a consumer. But you can see here we have blob table. Blobs are actually nothing but binary large objects. It might be our media files or image files which we want to use it in our applications. We can put it on the blobs. Then we have tables which are NoSQL tables. They are not relational, but they are highly massively scalable. They host terabytes, or they can host terabytes of data in them. And I will move further into, before I jump into individual services, just to give you a background of storage accounts. Storage account is the logical container for all the storage resources that we want to create. So every storage resource that we want to create and use from Azure, it has to go inside in a storage account. And there are a couple of storage account types that we can create. One is general purpose storage account type, under which we can create any type of storage resource, for example blob, table, queue, or file share. but there is a specific storage account type which is optimized for blob storage service. As I said before, there can be only hundreds storage accounts created within a subscription, but we can increase that quota by contacting Microsoft support. Each storage account can host up to a 500 terabyte of storage data in that. Shared access signatures, before we put any data and provide access to the users to access the data, it becomes very critical that we should ensure that the data is secure and the access is controlled. It should not happen that our data is accessible to everyone on internet, though there is a controlled access where we can actually give access to everyone on the internet, but that is just for generic data, for example image files which we want to host it on our website's dashboard, which is, or the home page, which is visible for general public. But for resources which are restricted, we need to have a controlled access, and how we can control that is using shared access signature, which is nothing but we provide a code in the form of a URL, and that URL actually has a token in that, and whosoever in our user group has that token with them, they can actually access that resource in our storage. And there are a couple of types of shared access signatures that we can create. One is service as shared access signature, one is account. Shared access signatures, as the name suggests, account can be applied for at the storage account level. All the resources which are present in the storage account are accessible using that shared access signature. Whereas if it's specific to a service, it will be specific for a blob or a table or a queue for whichever resource the signature has been generated. Whenever we are storing our data in Azure storage, it by default creates 3 copies of it for redundancy, because even though it is a cloud and we know it's reliable, but still Microsoft supports 99.9% SLA, so there are chances of transient failures or hardware failures or something which might result in data loss. So Microsoft supports 3 redundant copies of the data that we are hosting in Azure storage, but where we want them to store those copies is what we have in our hand. We can have it locally in the same data center, or we can have it spread it across the different regions. Coming to Azure Blob Storage, as I was said, it is nothing but a large object which might be any image file or video file or anything. Whenever we are creating a resource or blob storage, it has to go inside a container. Container is nothing but a logical structure, like we have folder in our file systems in laptops. It's highly cost effective because we can store terabytes of data at very low cost. And the URL that you are seeing here this is how it looks like whenever we create upload data in blob storage. We can connect to that blob using this URL, where storage account will be in the primary domain, and then we have to specify the container which holds that blob, and at the end we specify the blob. Blobs can be of multiple types. It might be of blobs, it might be append, or it might be page blobs, and all these 3 types actually differ on their usages. Blobs are generally used when we have data like images which has to be stored as blocks, and generally under blobs we can store we divide data into blocks of around 100 MB. Earlier this limit used to be 5 MB, now it's increased to 100 MB, and within a single blob we can have close to 50,000 blobs, so which turns out to be around 500 terabyte or something, or equal to how storage account capability is. Append blobs are based on blocks, but they are blobs, but they are actually optimized for appending. Whenever we want to keep on appending data in blocks, it's most optimized for that. Page blobs is when we have data which can be categorized into 512 bytes pages, and we want to apply pagination in our data. That is where we can use the page blobs. This is how it looks like. We have our storage account. Within that we have container, then within container we have blob, and when we are creating a blob we have to specify what blob type we want to create. So it might be block or page or append, whichever it is. Table storage, as I was saying, it is a NoSQL design which supports structured data, but please note, it's not relational. So we cannot compare it to a SQL Server database as is, but it inherits the almost same features that blob inherits from storage account. It's highly scalable and it's very cost effective as compared to a SQL Server database. So scenarios where we just need to store structured data and might not be relational in nature, we should actually opt for table there. And the URL looks quite similar to what we have for blob, but it doesn't have any logical container into which it should go. So after storage account, we have to specify the table name. So tables, as I said, table is NoSQL database. It contains key value pairs, and those key value pairs are known as entities. Whenever we are creating a table, it actually creates three properties automatically for each entity, which is known as partition key, row key, and timestamp. Timestamp is nothing but the time whenever we are adding or modifying that, or the last modified time of that entity. But partition key and row key is something that you should be aware of. It relates to how table storage is created at the backend in the data center, Azure data center. We have partitions where all the data go and resides, and within partitions we have rows where the data is sorted out while storing it. So it's up to us what we want to choose as a partition key or a row key, whichever property we might want to, but it should be unique. The combination of partition key and row key should be unique. For example, I might have a partition key for country, let's say US, and for row key I might have city. So within US, Omaha might be the row key. And overall we can have 255 properties added to each entity, but since we have three which are automatically created, so that leaves us that we can have custom 252 properties to each entity. And since it's NoSQL and it's not relational, it gives us flexibility that each entity might have a different structure. It doesn't mean that I might not have a property A in entity 1 and I cannot have property B in entity 2. I can have different set of properties in different entities. So this is how I look like. This was the example I was taking. I can have country as partitions where I can provide the country name as the partition key. Within that I can have row based on the row keys based on the cities where the users belong to or whatever it is. So likewise we can choose for the combinations of partition key and row key. Queues, I hope most of you will be aware of how messaging queues work. So it's the similar implementation which is part of Azure storage. It saves messages first in first out. It's all same concepts as messaging queue, but the only restrictions that we have is it supports a certain size of messages. Like in storage queues we have, it can support only 64 KB size of packets that it can hold, and it can only hold for up to 7 days. So after 7 days it automatically deletes them. And how queue work is, whenever we are writing a message, it will keep on putting it back till the time it is not deleted at the 7th day. So there are a couple of concepts which you should be aware of. For example, I have a worker background process which reads from the queue whichever, and I have a web role or a website which puts a image processing request, and I want to process it in my image processing background role. I am putting messages on a queue. Queue will actually keep on populating. It's a duty of my image processing role to delete that message after it is processed. If it doesn't delete, what happens is whenever a message is dequeued from the queue, it actually just marks it invisible for some time. And if the role which is processing it doesn't comes back within a specific time, it actually again pushes back in the queue. So it's the rule for the role which is processing that queue message to actually, once processing is done, it should come back and delete that message. Otherwise it will again keep on pushing it back.
So there is a concept called poison count, so poison message, where we can go and specify how many number of times queue should keep on populating that message again and again. So ensure that whenever you are working with queues, you do and go and mention that, so that it doesn't keeps on retrying pushing it every time. And since I said there is a limitation of time to live where the messages expires after 7 days and the size limit, there is another feature which is part of service bus called the service bus queues, which supports higher data size, but you can go and check it out if that is your requirement. This is how it looks like. Within storage accounts we can have our queues, and we can put in messages onto it and process it in our background roles. Last but not the least, in blob in storage we also have file shares, which work same as we have network shares in our networks. They are based on SMB protocols, when I say SMB protocols, it comes with some restrictions. For example, when we work with Windows, we can access those file shares across regions within Azure resources, but if it's on a Linux environment, we cannot, because SMB is not supported. It doesn't support encryption. But there is another workaround on it, because since it's a part of Azure resource, and all Azure resources are exposed over REST, so we can actually access these resources over REST, though we cannot mount it as a mountable drive, but we can still access the data using REST. And the latest version of it's based on SMB3, and it can be maximum of 5 TB, and each file that can be stored on that file share can be maximum of 1 terabyte in size. And this is how it looks like, quite similar to what we have it as network shares. We have network shares mounted as mounted drives on our file systems. Then we have folders or directories, and within them we have the actual files. So let me quickly wrap it off. I will show you couple of tools which you can use for Azure storage. So this one is Azure Storage Explorer, which you can go and download it from Microsoft's website. It was coming from it was earlier, I believe, open source, which Microsoft has acquired, and now they are releasing it free of cost. So I have connected to my subscription here. Within that, I have already created a storage account before. Once I connect to my subscription, it lists down all the storage accounts within that. Within that, I can see all the blob containers, file shares, queues and tables. I didn't create any queues and tables, I believe. And within blob containers, I have couple of containers. If I go there, I can actually go, and it works quite similar to how we have our file system in our PCs right now. So we can go ahead and upload files over here, or we can upload folders, files, whichever we want. Point here to be noted is, when we are uploading any folder in file share, it actually maintains that folder structure. But when we are uploading folders in blobs, it actually doesn't store any folder structure. It stores everything as a blob. What happens is, blob names allow slashes in them, so that actually when you are accessing it over a file system, you will think of it as a folder structure, but ultimately under the hood it's just the blob name which has slash also, and folder name appended to it. So I can go ahead and create a folder over here, and it says virtual directory because it doesn't exist at all. It's just a hierarchy that we want to create. We can go and manage our file share like that. We can go ahead and create our tables. You can see here a couple of properties which are listed here is partition key and row key. And the timestamp, these three properties I was talking about, which gets created automatically when we are creating a table. And these all are custom properties which are created as part of a table. But as what I was saying was,
table is quite flexible, so we only need to have these 3 properties in each entity. Rest of the properties might be having different values in them, and it won't fail, it won't give any error in that. I wanted to cover SQL database also, but I will quickly pass on it. So it's nothing but a cloud database on a service. The main thing you should keep in mind is it's running on SQL Server engine, but it doesn't support each and everything that is supported by a SQL Server instance which is running in your on-premise data center on a machine. There is a set of service differences from the on-premise SQL Server. So if you are planning to use SQL database, you should be aware of, and there are few things which you cannot directly put it there. So for example, in one of my projects we were using SSRS, which is not supported in SQL database as such. So we have to create a virtual machine as a database server, and we have created SQL Server instance on that. We have configured SSRS. So that is another approach if you want to have your database in Azure. And when I started working on SQL databases, every time we were supposed to go and create individual databases under each different tier, what I told before, like basic, standard and premium. But what used to happen was, even if I create a basic, it has a minimum size of maximum size of 2 gigs. So even if I am having data for only 100 megabytes, it will still charge me for 2 gigs. So Microsoft came up with a concept called Elastic Pool, where we can create a pool of resources and we can host a number of databases on it. So that is worth checking if you have huge number of databases which are running and which generally don't consume all the resources in that tier. So you should go and check it out. And as I said, it's well suited for large number of databases with low average utilization, with relatively infrequent utilization spikes. So SQL Server in a VM, I just described, we can create database servers on a VM using SQL Server. We can also, likewise, we can also create MySQL databases. Okay, and finally, if you are starting with Azure, please consider few things, keep in your mind. Whenever you are creating any resource, you are using any resource, try to have multiple instances. For example, for a web app, have at least 2 instances or 3 instances, because cloud doesn't mean that it will never go down. It has its own set of downtimes because of hardware failures. It might happen, or it might be because of a routine upgrade. So be prepared for that. And Microsoft SLA says that you should have at least 2 instances for all those resources if you want SLA. Scale out versus scale up. Scale out is when you scale your resources horizontally, and scale up is when you scale it vertically. What I mean is, for example, I have a database server. I have an option to go ahead and move it from basic tier to standard to premier, or I can add a number of I can create another number of instances to support my load. So you should be aware of those scaling options. You can also go for auto scaling. And as I said, make your applications to handle transient failures. It says it's 99% proof, but still, if something happens, your application should be able to handle transient failures, because your applications are going to be used by your clients. Co-locate your resources whenever you are creating your resources in Azure. Try to keep them in same region, because few of the services are charged for data egress also. What I mean by data egress is, if they are passing any data outside the region, they are transferring any data outside the region, Microsoft charges you for that. I am not sure if there is any charges for my data ingress. Mostly it's free, but for egress they do charge. Destroy Azure resources if you are not using them, because Microsoft is not your friend. They will keep on charging you. So it's, and if you are using a subscription which has a credit limit, it's wise to actually delete the resources when you are logging off. Deploy related resources in a single resource group, and please don't deploy anything on Classic Portal and Classic Model. Whichever resource you are trying with and using in your projects, please use resource manager model, and choose the pricing tier correctly as needed. It should not be in one of my projects we were using SQL Server, which was running on Elastic Pool, and we have seen hundreds of timeout error because in Elastic Pool it is a shared resource, and we went for it because we thought we will not see utilization spikes in so many cases. But what happened was, in the Elastic Pool we had two databases. Both of those databases have seen spikes at the same time. So one of the databases consumed all the resources and the other one started throwing timeout errors. So either our application should be able to handle those failures, or we should choose the tiers correctly. So then we have moved those databases into P1 or P2 premium tiers. So next steps, my intent for this session was basically two things. First of all, this was my first session, so I didn't want to cover anything where I fall into a wrong place and I'm not able to cover anything, but I wanted to cover basics. And moreover, I thought everyone in the audience might not be aware of everything in Azure. So I assumed that it's better to start with basics. So what's coming up is I'm planning to, if my project is here until June, so most likely if it extends, my plan is to take more sessions on Azure depending upon how the schedule is. So in that I'm planning to cover more deep dive sessions into certain features. And from your side, what you can do is you can go and check it out, Azure certifications. Microsoft has a certain Azure certification tracks which will be helpful if you are looking to do Azure development. The slides that I have prepared, there is a free ebook which is downloadable from Microsoft, which you can go and check it out. It has all the basics that are required for Azure developments. I have taken reference from them outside MSDN. You should check it out, Azure blog regularly. There are really some good people who keep on posting over there, and that's if they will get first-hand information which is sometimes not released anywhere else. Channel 9 supports much content on Azure like other technologies, but two shows which I like is Azure Fridays and Cloud Cover. I don't know how Cloud Cover is going now, but I started with Cloud Cover and now I follow Azure Friday also sometimes. So those are two shows which you should try it out. They are not very long, they are only 10 minutes, 20 minutes covering individual features. It will be very helpful. So if any questions, you can shoot at me or we can talk offline. And you can take down my email or my Skype handle. I would appreciate if any one of you can share your feedback. This was my first session, so I'm looking forward for a constructive feedback so that I can improve upon next sessions. Thank you.